British composer Elisabeth Lutyens wrote mostly atonal and serial music, a proclivity that earned her the nickname 12-Tone Lizzie. Her love of atonality put her out of step with her British contemporaries, whose mostly tonal or pitch-centric music Lutyens called cowpat music. She composed many solo and chamber works, stage works including opera, and film music. Lutyens composed Opus 126 in 1978. As in Debussy's Preludes, the title of each of Lutyens' preludes appears at its conclusion. All of the prelude titles in Opus 126 quote British poet John Keats. Short and sparsely textured, this ametrical prelude offers an ideal entry into serialism. It features pitch repetitions, elisions, and so-called wrong notes, and thus avoids imparting many of the myths Joe Straus outlines in his 2009 book, 12-Tone Music in America. Also, as Kara Stroud and Michael Buchler have noted, while choosing brief pieces that demonstrate a compositional technique perfectly is tempting, teaching only the most systematic works can convey the unrealistic expectation that serial and other post-tonal music always follows a tidy system. This prelude provides ample messiness in its serial approach without overwhelming students. Prelude number 1 ends with the text, "whose name was writ in water." As he was dying of tuberculosis at age 25, Keats asked his friends to include the following quote on his gravestone without his name. "Here lies one whose name was writ in water." Before we listen to the piece, I ask students to consider the implications of this phrase for Keats and for artists more generally. I also ask students what they might expect of a piece of music that ends with this title. Would it be tonal, atonal, or pitch-centric? Would it be fast or slow? Would it have many abrupt dynamic shifts or few? What sort of register or instrumentation would we expect? I find that articulating a vision helps keep students from taking compositional decisions for granted, which increases their appreciation. All of the Opus 126 preludes are based on the same row. This row avoids triadic subsets or anything else that's tonal referential, aside from several major and minor thirds and a couple of perfect fourths. Prominent subsets include 2 hexachords, 0, 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, and 0, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8. These are RI combinatorial. Then we have tetrachords, 0, 1, 2, 5, 0, 1, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 0, 1, 6, 7. And trichords, 0, 1, 4, 016, 015, and 012. The first 28 measures are fairly straightforward. While there are a couple of wrong notes, it's easy to locate the rows. Like the cycle as a whole, however, the first prelude serial approach grows more complex as the piece unfolds. For this video, I'll focus on the end of the prelude, measures 24 through 41. I've identified 6 motives in this movement, which are also labeled. Measures 24 through 27 presents row R5, which technically ends with a pitch class F. However, the prominent F sharp in the left hand, which is the 10th pitch of R5, forms a common tone with the beginning of the next row, P6. After the repeated notes, P6 continues with a declination. Although it does not end with an E, the prominent E4 in the left hand of measure 30 creates another audible common tone with the third note of RI8. I'll now play this excerpt performed by pianist Martin Jones. I2 begins with a declamation followed by a trill. The chord in measure 35 demonstrates a rather striking departure from the row. Instead of E, E flat B, Lutyens uses D, C sharp A for pitches 8, 9, 10 of I2, thus swapping out the original pitch class set 015 for another 015, transposed down 2 semitones. The drops motive that ends I2 elides with the beginning of R3. R3 continues with repeated forte chords and ends with a pianissimo cadence. Like R3, the final row I0 begins with an elision between row forms. The dyad C, E flat both ends RI3 and begins I0. The prelude ends with a statement of the drops motive, followed by a brief declamation and a fleeting ripple. No cadential gesture ends the prelude. It simply evaporates into nothingness. Relatively few obvious connections appear among rows in the first 32 measures of the prelude. Near the end, however, invariance between successive row forms increases. Rows I2 and R3 share 3 invariant dyads, including, as we know, the elided dyad between them. We also know that the last 2 rows, R3 and I0, elide. However, these last rows also turn out to be a combinatorial pair, the only one in the whole prelude. Of course, since these rows are not heard in counterpoint with one another, the combinatorial relationship is abstract. That is, the resultant aggregates that often emerge from combinatorial pairings are not explicitly heard. However, this is but the first of 7 serial preludes, all of which are based on the same row. One must stay tuned to learn whether more is made of this combinatorial foreshadowing in ensuing preludes. Like ripples in water, this prelude's fleeting motives resist establishing a predictable order, evoking a kaleidoscopic sense of impermanence. Despite occasional invariance and elision, and the use of a combinatorial pairing, most row relationships avoid systematic coherence, which intensifies the work's ephemerality. Preludes 2 through 7 offer enticing opportunities for further study. Thank you for watching.